A police officer, bleeding out, alone on a frozen street in the dead of night. One man stopped, everyone else drove past. He wasn't a cop. He wasn't a hero. He was just a tired warehouse worker, trying to get home to his 9-year-old son. That's what they thought. What the darkness didn't know, what nobody on that street knew, was that this quiet, unremarkable man had once operated in places that don't appear on any map, under orders that never existed on paper. And the instincts you earn in those places, they don't sleep. If stories like this hit different for you, raw, real, cinematic hit, subscribe right now and ring that bell so you never miss what's coming next. Drop your city and country in the comments. I want to see exactly how far this story travels. Like this video if you're staying until the end. Because trust me, you're going to want to see where this goes. The snow came in sideways, not the soft, cinematic kind that settles gently on windowsills and makes children press their faces against cold glass. This was Montana winter doing what Montana winter actually does, driving frozen needles horizontally across empty streets, cutting through jackets, burning exposed skin, punishing anyone foolish enough to be outside past midnight. Mason Rourke was outside past midnight. He had his collar up and his chin tucked low, boot heels, crunching a familiar rhythm on the sidewalk. 3 miles from the loading docks of Cascadia Freight Solutions to the apartment on Birchwood Avenue. He'd walked it 200 times, knew every cracked square of pavement, every broken streetlight, every alley where the wind funneled and hit you like a wall. He wasn't thinking about any of that tonight. He was thinking about tomorrow's lunch. Owen had asked for the peanut butter sandwich cut in triangles, not rectangles. Masons had been cutting them in rectangles for 3 weeks, and apparently that was a serious problem that needed correcting immediately. 9-year-olds had opinions, strong ones. Mason had decided that honoring those opinions was maybe the most important thing he did anymore. Rex walked beside him, a lean Belgian Malinois with a black mask and amber eyes that caught light from storefronts and gave nothing back. The dog moved the way Mason moved, economical, quiet, always slightly ahead of the leash's pull. They matched each other. They'd been matching each other for 4 years. Rex stopped, not slowed, stopped, all 4 paws planted, head raised. Every muscle under that short coat went from loose to wire-tight in less than a second. Mason felt it before he processed it. Some channel in his nervous system that years of civilian life had quieted but never fully closed suddenly opened back up. His stride broke. His eyes stopped moving the way tired eyes move, unfocused, lazy, and started moving the way trained eyes move. Sector left. Sector right. Threat indicators. What do you see, buddy? He didn't say it out loud. Didn't need to. 20 meters ahead, half swallowed by shadow and spinning cruisers, a Silver Creek PD cruiser sat at a wrong angle against the curb. The front end was pushed in. The driver's door hung open. The rack lights weren't running. The engine was running. He could hear it idling, could see exhaust curling white from the tailpipe into the frozen air, but the lights were off, and the door was open, and nobody was sitting behind the wheel. Mason scanned the cruiser, then passed it. Then he saw her. She was between the cruiser and the building wall, half sitting, half collapsed, one arm pressed against her side, the other braced against the brick, trying to hold herself upright. The uniform was dark black patrol jacket, silver badge, catching the weak amber of streetlight 40 feet away. But the darkness spreading from her left side was darker than the jacket. Darker than the night. Blood. A lot of it. Mason's body made a decision before his conscious mind finished the sentence. He was already moving, pulling Rex tight to his left side, closing the distance in a controlled approach, not a sprint, because sprinting in the dark toward a crime scene is how you become part of the crime scene. He was scanning as he moved. The cruiser, the alley mouth to the right, the recessed building entrance 8 feet past it, the roof line, the parked car across the street with fogged windows. His eyes were doing triage on the environment the same way he was about to do triage on the person bleeding against the wall. Ambush posture, cruiser disabled first, officer isolated second. Someone knew what they were doing. He crouched beside her, and his voice came out, low, steady, the volume you used when you needed someone conscious and needed them to stay that way without alerting anyone else in the area. Officer, can you hear me? I'm not a threat. I'm going to help you. Her eyes were open but glassy, tracking slow. Late 20s, maybe early 30s. Dark hair plastered, to her forehead. She'd taken something to the left side. He could see the tear in the jacket, and when he pressed 2 fingers to the area, she flinched hard and made a sound low in her throat. No, I know. I know it hurts. I need you to stay with me. What's your name? A beat. She was fighting through it. Claire Donovan. Okay, Claire. I'm Mason. This is Rex. He's friendly. Ignore him. He was already pulling his jacket off. The cold hit him like a fist. He pressed the jacket against her side and guided her hand to it. Hold pressure. Right there. Don't let go. My radio. She was looking toward the cruiser. I can't reach my radio. I've got a phone. I'm calling right now. He had it out, dialing 911, watching Rex over his shoulder. The dog had turned toward the alley, watching the alley. Ears forward, body still, the absolute focused silence that meant Rex wasn't done processing something. The 911 operator answered on the second ring. 911, what's your emergency? I have an officer down at. He glanced at the nearest street sign, found it. Corner of Harlan and 5th Street in Silver Creek. Significant penetrating trauma to the left lateral torso. She's conscious. Blood loss is serious. I need EMS and backup units now. Code 3. A pause. Code 3. The operator probably heard that from civilians about twice a year. Sorry, law enforcement? Negative. I'm a civilian. Former military. Send everything you've got. He kept the phone on speaker, tucked it in his shirt pocket, and went back to working. His hands moved from memory checking Claire's pulse at the wrist, then the neck. Rapid but present. Breathing was shallow but bilateral. No sucking sounds, so the lung was probably okay. The wound itself, exit or entry. He couldn't tell yet, and it didn't change the immediate calculus. Pressure. Warmth. Consciousness. Claire, stay with me. Talk to me. How long ago did this happen? Maybe 10 minutes? I called it in, I don't know if it went through. Someone's coming. You're doing fine. He wasn't sure that second part was true, but he said it the way you say things when the truth isn't useful. What happened? She swallowed. Her jaw tightened against pain. Traffic stop. Single vehicle, no plates. The driver. She stopped. Reset. The driver got out before I could run the stop. He had something in his hand. I came around the door and... She didn't finish. She didn't have to. Rex growled. The warning bark Mason was used to on their walks when a raccoon moved too close to their route. This was different. Lower. Sustained. The sound a dog makes when it's identified something and is giving it one last chance to make a decision. Mason's hand found the back of Rex's collar without looking. He kept his eyes on the alley. The snow kept hammering down. The cruiser idled. The building across the street showed one lit window on the 3rd floor and the blue flicker of a television. Nothing moved in the alley. Nothing visible moved in the alley. Rex was still growling. He's still there. The thought landed in Mason's chest like a dropped weight. Cold and specific. Whoever did this to Claire Donovan hadn't run. Or hadn't run far. Maybe they were waiting to see if the officer died before backup arrived. Maybe they had a reason for being at that specific corner, at that specific hour, that wasn't finished yet. Mason looked at Claire. She was watching him with eyes that were working hard to stay focused. The person who did this, he said quietly. Did you see which direction they went? She tried to shake her head and winced instead. It happened fast. I went down. Then I heard a car? Maybe. She coughed and immediately pressed harder against her side. He heard a car, maybe. Or he heard footsteps and his brain was filling in details. Trauma did that. The mind tried to construct a narrative from incomplete data and usually got parts of it wrong. Rex was still growling at the alley. Not a car. Not a footstep pattern moving away. Someone still standing. Someone still watching. Mason made a decision that he recognized, even in the moment, was not a rational civilian decision. He moved Claire. Carefully with her left side braced, he shifted her back until the cruiser was between her and the alley. She hissed through her teeth, but didn't fight it. Then he straightened up and put himself between the cruiser and the darkness. 6 years out of the teams, 39 years old, aching knees, warehouse worker hands, a 9-year-old son who needed triangle sandwiches by morning. Standing in the snow at midnight between a bleeding cop and something that hadn't decided to leave yet. He was aware of how absurd this was. He was also aware that being aware of how absurd something is doesn't change what you have to do. Easy, Rex. Not quiet, Rex. Easy. Different command. Different meaning. I see it too. We're watching. The alley gave nothing back. Barely audible under the wind a sound. A shift of weight on packed snow. The specific compression of a boot heel rotating slightly. Someone adjusting their footing. Someone who'd been standing still long enough that standing still was becoming uncomfortable. The first siren reached him from the east, still maybe a mile out, the wail, rising and falling as it moved through intersections. A second one. Then radio crackle, he could hear it coming from the cruiser's open door. Units reporting in, coordinates being relayed, the controlled chaos of a department mobilizing. And then the alley was just an alley. The sound of that boot adjusting hadn't come again. But something in Rex changed a fraction of release in the tension, the ears dropping 2 degrees from full alert to high alert. Whatever had been standing in that darkness had made a decision, and that decision involved distance. Mason let out a breath he hadn't catalogued taking. He went back to Claire. She was still conscious. The jacket against her side was soaked through, but her grip on it was tight, purposeful. She was fighting. He respected that immediately and completely. They're close, he told her. 2 minutes, maybe less. I can hear the siren patterns. He's second units running parallel on Garfield. They'll converge. He stopped. This wasn't useful information to her. They're close. You're going to be okay. Claire looked at him, steady, despite everything. Who are you? It was a reasonable question. The man crouching in the snow beside her, hands red with her blood, jacket lost to a tourniquet, dog growling at shadows. Just somebody who was walking home, Mason said. She looked at him for another moment, like she wasn't sure she believed that, and was too tired to press it. The sirens got loud. Then the blue and red light came around the corner in a wave. 2 units, then a third, flooding the street with color and noise. Doors opened before the cars fully stopped. Mason heard the crunch of boots on snow from multiple directions, heard someone shout, heard the unmistakable elevated pitch of cops responding to a scene where one of their own was down. He straightened slowly, away from Claire, and raised both hands. Rex sat, good dog. The flashlight beams hit him, 4 of them at once. The voice loud clipped, carrying the specific tension of someone with a firearm raised and a finger that was not relaxed. Move! Hands where I can see them. Don't move. Hands are up, Mason said. Even. Quiet. The voice you used when you needed someone across a room to understand that you were not the problem without anyone having to get shot first to prove it. More lights, more voices. He heard someone reach Claire, heard her voice cutting through the chaos, urgent but present. A paramedic unit was pulling up now, the amber hazard lights blooming behind the red and blue. He's the one who... Claire's voice, but getting lost in the noise. Sir, on your knees. Get on your knees right now. Mason went to his knees. The snow was deep enough that he sank 3 inches. The cold went through his pants immediately. Rex made a sound but stayed sitting. He could see at least 3 weapons oriented in his direction. Plainclothes officer to his left, 2 uniformed to his right. Another unit coming around the rear of the cruiser. The scene had the specific organized chaos of a department that ran good tactical drills, multiple concangled. Approach routes controlled, nobody crossing each other's fields. Good department, Mason thought, kneeling in the snow with his hands above his head. Good response, he saved me. Claire's voice, quieter this time, but the chaos around her had dropped half a notch, and the words landed. 3 words. The weapons didn't lower immediately, they shouldn't have. Not on 3 words alone, but Mason felt the orientation of the scene shift. One of the uniformed officers looked toward Claire. The plainclothes stepped closer, maintaining angle, but the specific quality of the tension in the air changed. From active threat assessment to okay, what is this? A paramedic pushed past 2 officers to get to Claire, and the 2 officers let him, and that meant some part of their attention was now on the medical situation rather than the unknown civilian in the snow, and that meant the next 30 seconds were going to determine how the rest of this night went. Mason held his position, hands up, steady. He'd been in more uncomfortable situations. He didn't say that. One of the officers stepped toward him, young, maybe 26, jaw tight, eyes doing the scan assess categorize loop on repeat. Who are you? What are you doing here? Mason Rourke. I live on Birchwood. I was walking home from work. Found Officer Donovan down approximately 8 minutes before you arrived. I called 911. He kept his voice at the same register throughout. Urgency. No resentment. No attempt to impress. Just data. Where do you work? Cascadia Freight. Loading. 6 p.m. to 11. The officer was staring at his hands, at the blood on them. That's her blood, Mason said. I applied direct pressure with my jacket. It's under her right hand. I'm also telling you. He stopped, chose the next words carefully. I'm telling you that whoever attacked her may not have left the area. My dog was tracking toward the alley on the south side of me when your unit arrived. The subject may have gone mobile when he heard the sirens, but the window is narrow. The officer blinked. Your dog. Belgian Malinois. 4 years, trained in scent and alert work. When I say he was tracking toward that alley, I believe there's a high probability the suspect was using it as a hide position. A beat of silence. The plainclothes detective had moved closer during this exchange. She was maybe 40, dark hair pulled back, wearing a jacket that said SCPD in yellow letters across the back. She was looking at Mason with an expression he recognized, not hostility. Exactly. More like recalibration. The look of someone encountering data that doesn't fit the model they walked in with. You said former military, she said. It wasn't a question. She'd clearly heard the 911 call. Yes. Which branch? He looked at her evenly. Navy. She held his gaze for a moment. Then she looked at the young officer beside her. Get his hands uncuffed and get him a blanket. He's freezing. She looked back at Mason. I'm Detective Reyes. We're going to need to talk. But first, she turned toward the alley. Show me where your dog was focused. Mason lowered his hands slowly. Rex stood up. And somewhere on the other side of the building, in the pressed darkness between 2 dumpsters and a chain-link fence, a man in a dark jacket listened to the sound of the sirens multiplying and made a calculation about how long he could stay where he was. About the dog. He didn't know. About the man. He was about to find out about both. Detective Reyes moved fast for someone who'd just arrived at a live scene. He didn't veet. She didn't wait for Mason to stand fully before she was already walking toward the south side of the building. One hand on the radio clipped to her shoulder strap, the other holding a flashlight that she hadn't turned on yet. The young officer, his nameplate, said Briggs, hovered near Mason with the particular uncertainty of someone who'd been told to give a man a blanket, but wasn't sure the man was safe enough to approach with a blanket. Mason stood up from the snow. His knees protested. He didn't acknowledge it. You okay? Briggs asked. Fine. Mason accepted the emergency blanket. The officer was holding out the silver Mylar kind that crinkled like gift wrap and did about 40% of what a real jacket did. He draped it over his shoulders and looked at Rex. Rex came to his left side. They followed Reyes. The south side of the building was a maintenance corridor, the kind of space that exists in every mid-sized commercial cut block, too narrow to be useful, too sheltered to be pleasant, collecting whatever the wind pushed in. Dumpsters at the far end. A chain-link fence beyond them, closing off an empty lot that backed up against an abandoned auto repair shop, the kind of place that had been closed long enough for its sign to have faded to white. Beyond the fence, the lot was maybe 40 meters of compacted snow and dead weeds, and whatever people threw over fences when they thought nobody would notice. Reyes had her flashlight on now. She played it across the corridor entrance without stepping in. Talk me through what you observed, she said, not looking at him, still watching the corridor. My dog alerted at approximately the moment I identified Officer Donovan, Mason said. Direction was toward this corridor. Alert posture was sustained, not a passing scent, a fixed point. About 4 minutes after I moved Officer Donovan behind the cruiser, I heard a single weight shift from inside the corridor. Boot heel on packed snow, rotating. The kind of movement you make when you've been holding still too long. And you didn't. Reyes stopped herself, refreshed. What was your assessment of the subject's intent at that point? I didn't know. Could have been a witness who panicked when the siren started. Could have been the person who put Claire on the ground. He paused. Rex was treating it like the second option. Reyes looked at the dog. Rex was looking into the corridor. Show me, she said. Mason unclipped the leash. Rex moved forward 3 steps and stopped, nose down, then swept left, then tracked forward again, moving in the deliberate pattern of a dog following a trail that was still warm. Not searching, following. There was a difference, and it was visible if you knew what you were looking at. Reyes knew what she was looking at. How long have you had him? She asked. 4 years. Trained where? Started with a handler trainer in Billings. We've put about 2,000 hours into him. Mason watched Rex reach the far dumpster and stop, circling once, but the foundation was already there. I bought him from a decommission lot in Tacoma. He'd washed out of a DoD contract program. Too high drive for the unit they were placing him in. He set it flatly, without color. He suited me fine. Reyes looked at him sideways. She had the kind of face that processed information without broadcasting much of it. Sharp cheekbones, dark eyes that moved systematically rather than randomly, the particular quality of stillness that came from years of interviewing people who were lying to her and having to look pleasant while they did it. Too high drive for a DoD program, she said. Yes. And you were Navy. Yes, she didn't ask the follow-up question. She didn't need to. The arithmetic was visible. Rex stopped at the fence. Sat. Looked back at Mason. Something on the other side. Your units need to move on that lot, Mason said. Whatever he left behind him when he heard the sirens, it went that direction. If he had a vehicle staged in the lot, you might still have a window. If he went on foot through the far side, your perimeter's going to determine whether you hold him. Reyes already had the radio up. All units, this is Reyes. I need containment on the vacant lot behind the former Garrett Auto on 5th, south side access from the alley behind Harlan. Now, and someone get K9 down here. She lowered the radio and looked at Mason. You said Rex is scent trained. Alert and track. He's not protection certified for active deployment. I'm not asking him to bite anyone. I'm asking if he can hold the trail until my K9 unit arrives. He can hold the trail. Reyes nodded once. Then she looked at the fence, then at the lot beyond it, then back at the building they'd come around from. Her jaw worked slightly, the way people's jaws worked when they were doing fast math on a situation that had more variables than they wanted. Briggs, she called back over her shoulder. The young officer appeared at the corridor entrance. Get me someone from the department who can verify this man's identity. A local check run the full federal system. Military service records, anything accessible. She looked at Mason. You got an ID? He pulled his wallet from his back pocket. Warehouse employee badge, Montana driver's license, 1 credit card with a credit limit that wouldn't embarrass him if someone looked but wouldn't impress anyone either. He held it out. Briggs took it the way you'd take something from someone you weren't 100% sure about yet. Mason James Rourke, he read aloud from the license. Birchwood Avenue. That's me, Mason said. Briggs went back toward the front of the building. Reyes looked at the ID, looked at Mason, handed it back without comment. For a moment there was just the wind and the sound of Rex's nails on the frozen ground as he maintained his position at the fence line, and the distant crackle of radio traffic as Reyes's containment order moved through the units. I'm going to need you to stay accessible, Reyes said. Detained, accessible. There's a difference. I understand the difference. Good, because in about 15 minutes, this scene is going to have more senior officers than I want, and some of them are going to have opinions about what a civilian with a military background was doing in the middle of my crime scene. Those opinions are not going to be entirely charitable. Mason looked at her. Are yours? He asked. Reyes almost smiled. It didn't quite land. I don't have opinions yet, she said. I have observations. The opinions come later, when I have more data, was a more honest answer than he'd expected. He respected it enough not to push. They walked back to the front of the building. The scene had expanded in the time they'd been around the south side. 2 more units had arrived, plus a supervisor's vehicle, a dark SUV with a single light bar, parked at an angle that suggested someone who was used to arriving at scenes that were already in progress and wanting to make clear they were now the senior person present. The supervisor was a heavy-set man in his mid-50s, gray at the temples, jacket showing captain's bars. He was talking to one of the uniformed officers and looking at Mason with the specific evaluative squint of someone who had been told an unusual story and wasn't sure how much of it to believe. The paramedic unit was still on scene. Claire was on a stretcher. Now, an oxygen mask over her face. Line in, the 2 medics working with the calibrated urgency that meant she was stable but not stable enough for the situation to be comfortable. They were loading her into the ambulance as Mason came back around the building. He stopped walking for a moment and watched. She turned her head as they rolled her in. Her eyes found him, through the snow and the light in the distance. She raised one hand slightly from the stretcher, barely, just a few inches, and then the ambulance doors closed and she was gone, and the lights came on, and it pulled away from the curb. Mason stood there for a second. Rex pressed against his left leg. "Mr. Rourke," the captain's voice. Mason turned. The man was walking toward him, not quickly, the kind of measured pace that was designed to establish that he was not hurrying for anyone. "I'm Captain Harold Voss." He didn't offer a hand. "You're the civilian who found Officer Donovan." "Yes, sir. A veteran Navy. I separated 6 years ago." Voss looked him up and down. Mason was aware of how he looked: no jacket, jeans and a thermal shirt, warehouse worker boots, dried blood on his hands and forearms, a crinkled silver emergency blanket over his shoulders. He looked like exactly what he was, which was a man who'd spent several hours doing physical labor in a cold building, and then spent several more minutes in the snow pressing his hands against someone else's wound. "Detective Reyes tells me you observed potential suspect position near the south corridor." "That's right, and your dog indicated." "Yes." Voss looked at Rex. Rex looked at Voss with the particular amber-eyed calm of a dog that had assessed this person and found them unthreatening but not interesting. "What unit were you with?" Voss asked. "I'd rather not get into that, sir." Voss's eyes came back to Mason. Something shifted in them, not quite hostility, more like the look of a man recalibrating, the way Reyes had done, but less gracefully. "You'd rather not. It's not relevant to what happened tonight." "I'll decide what's relevant, Mr. Rourke." Mason held his gaze. He said nothing. He'd found over the years that the most effective response to being told what someone else would decide was sometimes just to let the silence exist and see what they did with it. Voss didn't like the silence. "You have to understand how this looks," he said. There was a shift in his tone, still authoritative, working now, pressing into the space where he expected Mason to feel defensive. "My officer is down. We have an unknown civilian at the scene covered in her blood, claiming he found her, claiming he identified a suspect position. And now I'm being told you won't disclose your service record." "I didn't say I wouldn't disclose it. I said I'd rather not. If it becomes operationally necessary, I'll answer your questions." "Operationally necessary." Voss repeated it like it had a bad taste. "This isn't his operation, Mr. Rourke. This is a police investigation." "Yes, sir. And right now, whoever attacked Officer Donovan has been in the wind for approximately." Mason glanced at the time on Briggs's watch as the young officer passed nearby. 17 minutes. If your K9 unit isn't already on the trail I identified, the window is closing. Voss stared at him. "Are you telling me how to run my department?" "Sir, I'm telling you what I observed, and what the timeline means for your evidence trail." A beat of silence, wind, radio traffic. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked SCPD's K9 unit coming up from the east end of the block. Voss turned away without another word and walked toward the unit, which was, Mason thought, not a resolution but a postponement. The captain would be back with more questions and a different angle, and probably a couple of detectives positioned to watch Mason's face while he answered. Was fine, someone. He had nothing to hide about tonight. About other things. Other times. Other places that didn't appear on any official document. A small city police captain could access through normal channels. Those things weren't tonight's business. Reyes appeared at his elbow. "He's not your fan," she said. "I noticed. He's not mine either, for what it's worth. But he clears scenes fast when he's under pressure." "So," she shrugged. "How are your hands?" Mason looked at them. The blood had dried dark in the cold. His knuckles were starting to ache from the temperature. "Medic can clean them up if you want." "After." She looked at him. "After what?" He nodded toward where SCPD's K9 unit was being unloaded, a German Shepherd. Solid build, young. The handler, a woman in her 30s, who was working the dog through a focus exercise before bringing him to the scene. Good handler. The dog was responsive, eager, bouncing slightly on its feet in the way that meant it wanted to work. "After I brief your handler on what Rex found," he said. "She'll want the approach, trajectory, and the fence point. Save her 15 minutes of search." Reyes looked at the handler, then at Mason. "You think she'll take direction from a civilian?" I think she'll take accurate information from whoever has it, Mason said. That's what good handlers do. He walked toward the K9 unit before Reyes could tell him not to. The handler's name was Officer Kim Tran. She was shorter than Mason by 6 inches and had the kind of compact, precise physicality that came from years of working with high-drive dogs, quick movements, no wasted energy, eyes that process space in chunks rather than linearly. She looked at Mason the way you looked at someone who was walking toward your dog uninvited. "No, ma'am," he said, stopping at a comfortable distance. "I'm the civilian who found Officer Donovan. My dog alerted on a position in the south corridor about 14 minutes ago. I can give you the approach line and the fence contact point. Your dog will pick it up faster if you start from Rex's last confirmed position rather than working the street approach." Stared at him. "Your dog," she said, "Belgian Malinois. He's behind me." He didn't gesture back. Rex had followed at heel distance. "I can keep him back if you want clean scent, or I can have him demonstrate the approach." Your call. Tran looked past him at Rex, then at Mason. "What did your dog alert on?" "Aggression or track. Fixed position, sustained." The subject was holding still in the corridor, and Rex identified him by scent before I had visual on the corridor entrance. "How old is the track?" 14, 15 minutes. "You've got maybe another 10 before the corridor's too cold." He'd intervened. Tran made a decision without telegraphing it. She just started walking toward the south side of the building and didn't look back to see if Mason was following. He followed. Behind him, he heard Voss's voice carrying across the scene, asking Briggs where the civilian had gone, and Briggs's voice responding at a lower volume with something that included the word Tran. Then a pause that suggested Voss was doing the mental calculation of whether pulling Mason back would cost him anything operationally. It didn't cost Voss anything to let it go, so he let it go. The K9 search took 11 minutes. Tran's shepherd, his name was Holt. Yes, he'd intervened. She called it once in a quick command voice, and the dog responded with military precision, picked up the trail from Rex's fence contact point within 40 seconds and was through the fence and across the lot before the 2 backup officers had finished climbing over. Mason stayed on the corridor side of the fence with Rex. He could hear the radio traffic as Tran's unit moved across the lot, could parse the pattern of it, containment unit responding, positions being confirmed, the shepherd's handler calling short direction commands that told Mason exactly where the trail was leading without him being able to see it. East side of the lot, then the northeast corner, then the old repair shop. A burst of voices on the radio that had a different quality than the systematic sweep traffic that had been running for the past 10 minutes. Higher pitch, overlapping, the specific frequency of unexpected contact. Mason's hand found Rex's collar. Then, the sound of running feet. From 2 directions at once. Commands being shouted in the flat, declarative voice of officers who were no longer searching and were now responding. He heard a crash. Metal on metal, someone going through or into something. Clearly, across the frozen lot. On the ground. "On the ground right now. Don't move. Do not move." Rex whined once low. "Easy," Mason said, then silence. The specific silence of a scene that has just concluded its kinetic phase and is transitioning into its documentation phase. Controlled breathing over radios. Coordinates, the word secure used twice. Tran's voice, even in professional, subject in custody. Northeast corner of the lot, behind the shop structure, requesting transport, an evidence team at this location. Mason stood at the fence in the dark and the snow, and the mylar blanket that was doing less than advertised against the cold, and he let himself feel, for just a moment, the specific quiet of something having gone right. It didn't happen all the time. He'd been in enough situations to know that outcomes weren't guaranteed by the quality of your decisions. Sometimes you did everything correctly and it still didn't resolve the way it should. Sometimes the window closed before you could get through it. Sometimes the track went cold and the person on the stretcher didn't get to come back. Claire Donovan was on her way to surgery. The person who'd put her there was face down in the snow behind an abandoned repair shop, with 2 officers holding containment positions and a German shepherd sitting 6 feet away watching him with patient professional interest. Mason turned away from the fence and walked back toward the front of the building. The scene had grown while he'd been around the south side. Supervisor vehicle. A crime scene unit van, its side doors open, 2 technicians pulling cases out with the methodical ease of people who'd done this 100 times. A second ambulance, staging, probably precautionary. News was probably already moving through the department's personal networks. Officer Down always moved fast through those channels, faster than any official notification. Briggs intercepted him 20 feet from the building corner. Yes, the young officer's expression had changed. Not dramatically, he still had the careful blankness of someone trying to maintain professional composure, but something underneath it had shifted in the direction of reassessment. "They got him," Briggs said. "I heard. Captain wants to talk to you again." Mason looked toward where Voss was standing near the supervisor's SUV. The captain was on his phone, not looking in Mason's direction, but the body language of the officer nearest him suggested that this was a pause rather than a conclusion. "I figured he would," Mason said. "Look," Briggs stopped. He was working up to something, and he had the specific discomfort of a person who wasn't sure they had the standing to say what they wanted to say. "Man, the way when we came up on you, with the weapons and you responded to an officer down call and found an unknown civilian at the scene, covered in blood," Mason said. "You did exactly what you were supposed to do." Briggs blinked. "I was just going to say, you made the right call," Mason said. "Every one of you. If I'd been the problem, your response would have handled it. Apologize for good procedure." Briggs stood there for a moment, looking at him with an expression that wasn't quite easy to read, part gratitude, part something more complicated. The look of someone encountering a perspective that didn't match what they'd prepared themselves to receive. "Okay," Briggs said. "Yeah. Okay," he stepped back. Mason walked toward Voss. The captain ended his phone call as Mason approached. He turned, and the evaluative squint was back, but it had new information in it now. The kind of new information that doesn't immediately change someone's posture but does, clearly and demonstrably, change the calculation happening behind their eyes. "They found a weapon at the scene," Voss said, "consistent with Officer Donovan's injury." He paused. There's also preliminary evidence connecting the suspect to a series of armed robberies in the county going back 4 months." Mason nodded. "Mr. Rourke." Voss seemed to be choosing his words with more care than he had earlier, which was itself a form of communication. "I owe you a more professional interaction than the one I provided earlier." "You don't," Mason said. "You responded appropriately to the information you had." He meant it. He wasn't being polite. He had no interest in making Voss feel better about something that hadn't actually been a problem. The captain had done his job. The officers had done their jobs. The outcome was good. Voss stared at him with the expression of a man who wasn't sure how to handle being told he'd done the right thing by the person he'd been prepared to defend his behavior toward. "Is there anything you need?" Voss asked. "My jacket," Mason said. "If evidence doesn't need it for the whole duration, I'd like it back when you're finished. It's the warmest one I own." Something moved across Voss's face that was almost briefly insufficiently humor. "We'll make sure it's returned." Mason nodded. He looked at Rex. Rex was watching a crime scene technician photograph the damaged cruiser with the calm patience of a dog that had decided. This was interesting but not actionable. "I should get home," Mason said. "My son's there alone." "He's 9, Voss blinked. The recalibration was visible this time. "We'll need your formal statement tomorrow. Morning, if possible. I'll be there. Detective Reyes will handle it." "Fine." He started walking. He'd made it maybe 30 feet when Reyes fell in beside him, appearing out of the organized chaos, the way good detectives tended to present when they needed to be, invisible when they didn't. "We'll run the full evidence chain on the suspect," she said. "Probably have charge confirmation by morning." "Good. The trail your dog found is going to be in the report." She said it carefully, like she was watching to see how he received it. "That's fine," he said. "There's going to be attention on this. Media, department PR, the whole thing. Officer down, civilian assist. Suspect in custody same night. That's a story." Mason looked at her. "I'd rather it wasn't," he said. She almost smiled again. This time it landed slightly better. "I figured." They walked in silence. For a few seconds, the scene noise fading behind them, the street becoming just a street again, snow and cold, and the particular emptiness of a neighborhood at midnight when everyone with sense was inside. "Record's going to come through by morning," she said. "Whatever's in it." He said nothing. "And whatever's in it," she continued, not looking at him, looking at the street ahead. is going to change how some people in that department think about tonight. Does it change how you think about tonight? She considered that for a genuine moment. She said, "You were a man who stopped. That's what I saw." He didn't respond to that. He wasn't sure what to do with it, honestly. It was a simpler framing than what tonight had actually contained, and maybe that was why it was the right one. Yet his left intervened. Rex walked at his left heel, and Mason watched the dog's breath cloud white in the cold air. And somewhere ahead, the apartment on Birchwood Avenue had a 9-year-old asleep in the back bedroom who had gone to sleep expecting his father to come home. Mason walked faster. He'd been gone long enough. He was 2 blocks from the building when his phone buzzed. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer. He answered. Silence on the line. With the poor audio quality of someone calling from a building interior, a low voice male adult, not panicked but not calm either, carrying the specific register of someone choosing each word the way you chose steps on ice. You the one that found the cop. It wasn't a question. Mason stopped walking. Rex stopped. "Who is this?" Mason said. A pause. Maybe 3 seconds, long enough to be deliberate. "You should have stayed out of it," the voice said. "You got a kid, right? Birchwood Avenue. 9 years old." The call ended. Mason stood on the sidewalk and listened to the dead air where the call had been. 3 seconds, maybe 4. The kind of stillness that wasn't actually still. His pulse was doing something specific. A low, hard cadence he recognized from other moments in other places. The body's way of saying, "This is real. This is now. Pay attention." Rex was looking up at him. Mason looked down at the dog, up at the street. Then, at the apartment building 2 blocks ahead, the one with the light on in the 3rd floor window that was his window, the one he always left on when he worked nights, so the place didn't feel empty when Owen woke up. The light was still on. He was already walking, before he'd consciously decided to walk, the phone still in his hand, thumb moving to Reyes's number. She'd given him a card at the scene. Standard procedure. He'd put it in his back pocket without looking at it. He pulled it out while he walked, and the card was bent at the corner, and the number was slightly smeared from the cold, but still readable. She picked up on the second ring. "Reyes. It's Rourke. I just received a call from an unknown number. Male voice, adult. I found Officer Donovan. He knew my address and my son's age." Silence, 1 beat, professional. "When?" 30 seconds ago. "I'm 2 blocks from my apartment. Don't go in alone. Stop where you are. My son is in that apartment." "Mr. Rourke, I'm not stopping." Another beat. He heard her moving footsteps, a door, wind hitting a microphone. "Okay, keep me on the line. What's the number that called you?" He read it out while he walked. She was typing. He could hear the specific tap of thumbs on a department-issue phone. "That's a prepaid," she said. "I'll run it, but don't expect a name." A pause. "What exactly did he say?" "He said I should have stayed out of it. Then he mentioned my son and my address. Then he hung up." "Verbatim?" "Close enough." Rex was pulling ahead of him now, the leash going taut. The dog's pace had changed, not an alert, not a track. Something more like urgency. Animals picked up the biochemistry they were bonded to of the people they were and responded to it without filter. Mason shortened the leash and kept moving. "I'm sending a unit to your address," Reyes said. "ETA is how long?" A pause. He could hear her checking. 6 minutes. Maybe 7. He was 90 seconds out. "I'll be inside before they arrive," he said. "Mason." The first name was deliberate. If someone is in that apartment with my son, there is no version of this where I wait outside, he said. His voice was level. He wasn't angry. He wasn't scared, exactly. He was running on something cleaner than either of those things, a focused, functional state that he'd spent years training into himself and more years trying to turn off, and which had apparently decided that tonight was not the night to stay quiet. "I'll keep the line open. You'll hear what happens." He put the phone in his breast pocket, face up, speaker out. The building entrance was a glass and metal door, with a keypad and a broken intercom that had been broken for 8 months, and that the building manager kept saying he'd fix. Mason had complained twice, and then stopped complaining because complaining about things that weren't going to change was a tax on energy he didn't have. He keyed in, went through. Rex at heel, tight now, reading him completely. The lobby was empty. Mailroom door open, which it always was. Elevator on the ground floor, which it wasn't always. He ignored the elevator and took the stairs. 3rd floor. 12 steps per flight. 2 flights, he knew it without counting. He moved quietly, not creeping, not hesitant, but the automatic noise disciplines of someone who had spent years moving through spaces where noise was a liability. His boots found the edges of each step where the wood didn't creak. 3rd floor hallway. His apartment was 3C, end of the hall. The hall light was working tonight, which it wasn't always. Thin carpet, 2 other doors. The door to 3A, where the retired schoolteacher lived who kept odd hours and was usually awake at this time watching television, and 3B, which was a young couple who both worked early shifts and was certainly dark and quiet. 3C. He stopped 3 feet from the door and listened. This was the part where training diverged from instinct. Instinct said, open the door. Training said, gather information first. He stood in the hallway, and he breathed and he listened. Television noise from 3A. Wind against the building's north face. The refrigerator cycling, he could hear it through the door. That specific low hum that the old Frigidaire made every 40 minutes when it kicked on. Nothing else. He put his hand on the door handle. Unlocked. Which it should be he never locked it when Owen was inside alone. Because Owen didn't have a key yet, and last year Owen had gotten up to use the bathroom, and the door had swung shut in the wind that came through the hall, and the handle had caught. And Mason had come home to find his son sitting in the hallway in his pajamas, stoic but clearly shaken. And Mason had felt that in a way he still felt when he thought about it. He pushed the door open. The kitchen light was on. The living room lamp was on, the one he'd left on. Owen's bedroom door was closed, which it usually was. The kid ran warm, and the bedroom would get too hot with the heater on if the door was open. Nothing moved. Mason stepped inside. Rex moved with him, the dog's nose working immediately, processing the apartment's air. Alert. Rex padded to Owen's door and sniffed the gap at the base. Looked back at Mason. Sat down, person behind the door. Person I know. No threat sent. Mason crossed to Owen's door in 3 steps and opened it. Owen was asleep, curled on his left side the way he always slept, one arm around the stuffed dog, a black and tan plush that Owen had named Rex Jr. with complete seriousness, and which the real Rex had never expressed any opinion about. The nightlight was on. Owen's breathing was slow and even. Yes, he'd intervened. Mason stood in the doorway for a moment. Then he pulled the door almost closed and sat down heavily on the couch and put his face in his hands. His hands were still cold. The blood had dried on them and was flaking at the edges where the cold air had cured it. He could smell the snow and the exhaust from the ambulance and the specific iron smell that he's associated with field medicine and with things he'd rather not associate anything with. He picked up the phone. Rourke. I heard, Reyes said. She'd stayed on the line the whole time. Son's okay? Asleep. Okay. He heard her exhale. Okay. Unit still coming. 2 minutes. They'll take a position outside until we figure out what this call was. Could be a bluff, he said. Whoever's in custody, if the man in that lot had a partner, someone who wasn't at the scene, we're already running it. A pause. Mason. The suspect we picked up, he's not talking, but his prints are already matching 2 of the robbery scenes. This isn't a small operation. We don't know yet how many people are involved. So the call might be real. The call is real. The question is whether the threat is operational or intimidation. He looked at Owen's door. I can't tell the difference from here, he said. Neither can I. That's why the unit's coming. He sat on the couch with Rex's head on his knee, and he waited for the knock at the door. It came 3 minutes later. 2 officers, Briggs was one of them. Reyes had apparently sent him specifically, which Mason read as intentional. Briggs at least knew the situation's baseline. The other officer was a woman named Castillo, compact and quiet, who introduced herself in 4 words and then began doing a walkthrough of the apartment with the particular efficient courtesy of someone who'd done welfare checks before and knew how to not make them feel like searches. We'll stage outside, Briggs said, when Castillo had finished and they were all standing in the kitchen. You've got the call logged. Detective Reyes is tracing it. By morning, we should have a better picture of the second-party angle. He knew my son's age, Mason said. Briggs nodded. He was looking at the refrigerator, which had a crayon drawing stuck on it with a pizza magnet, Owen's interpretation of a dog, which was more accurate than most adults would manage. with specific attention given to the ears. "We'll be outside," Briggs said. After they left, Mason sat at the kitchen table and didn't sleep. He thought about the call, about the voice low, measured, not frantic. The voice of someone who'd just seen their operation go sideways and was reacting. More calculated than that. The choice to call at all was specific. It communicated something. Who you are. We know where you live. We know what matters to you. Wasn't a random threat. That was constructed intelligence, which meant someone had run him or had him run, in the window between his name going out on the 911 call and the call arriving on his phone. 40 minutes, maybe 45, fast. Too fast for it to be improvised. He turned it over until the kitchen window went from black to gray, and then Owen's door opened and his son appeared in the hallway, in the dinosaur pajamas, hair destroyed by sleep, squinting at the kitchen light. "Hey, bud." Owen processed the scene. Mason at the table, fully dressed, no jacket, hands wrapped in the clean cloth Masons had used to get the dried blood off after the officers left. "Did you just get home?" "Yeah. It's almost 6. Come here." Owen crossed the kitchen and let Mason pull him into a hug with the particular tolerance of a 9-year-old who had decided he was slightly too old for hugs, but made exceptions for specific circumstances that he never clearly defined. He was warm from sleep, and he smelled like the strawberry shampoo, and Mason held on for a second longer than was strictly necessary. "You smell like outside," Owen said into his shoulder. "I was outside a while. Did something happen? I helped somebody who needed help. Everything's okay." He let go and looked at his son's face. "You hungry?" "Yeah." "Sit down. I'll make eggs." He made eggs and he cut the toast in triangles without Owen having to ask, and Owen sat at the table and fed Rex pieces of toast under the table while pretending he wasn't doing that. And Mason stood at the stove and watched the gray winter morning arrive through the kitchen window and thought about what came next. Came next was the station. He dropped Owen at school, walked him in, spoke briefly to the front office about keeping an eye on him, didn't give them the full context because giving the full context would have caused a cascade of procedures that would have been more alarming for Owen than useful. And then he drove the 12-year-old Subaru to the Silver Creek Police Department and sat in the parking lot for a moment with Rex in the back seat. The department was a low, flat-roofed building that had been built in the 90s and hadn't been updated in ways that were visible from outside. An American flag, a Montana state flag, a handicapped space with faded paint. The kind of building that communicated modest budget and long institutional history in approximately equal measure. Mason went in. The front desk officer told him Detective Reyes was expecting him. Looked at Rex with the expression of someone who hadn't been briefed on the dog. "He's with me," Mason said. The officer called Reyes. Reyes apparently said it was fine. The officer looked at Rex again, with the resigned acceptance of someone adapting to circumstances outside their training. Reyes met him in a hallway that smelled like floor cleaner and old coffee, and led him to a room that was not, technically, an interrogation room. It had a table and chairs and a window, which interrogation rooms didn't usually have, but which had the particular neutral atmosphere of a designed for conversations that needed to be documented. A man was already in the room. Late 40s, civilian clothes, the specific civilian clothes that people who worked in institutional settings wore on their days off, dark slacks and a collared shirt, the unconscious uniform of someone who dressed professionally. For so long it had become the default. He had the posture of a man who was used to rooms like this, but usually sat on the other side of the table. He stood when Mason entered. "Mr. Rourke." He offered a hand. "I'm Warren Gall. I work with the FBI's Field Coordination Office in Helena. I drive up this morning when this case was flagged overnight." Mason shook the hand, measured the grip without meaning to. Former law enforcement, maybe former military, at least 15 years in institutional settings, all of that in the way the hand closed. "Flagged why?" Mason said. "Because the man Officer Tran apprehended last night is a person of interest in a federal investigation. One that started before last night and is considerably more complicated than a string of county robberies." Gall gestured to a chair. "Please sit down. I want to talk to you about what you observed. And I also want to talk to you about the call you received at approximately 1 in the morning." Mason sat. Rex settled under the table without being told. Reyes closed the door and took the chair to Mason's left. The call, Mason said. Gall opened a folder that was on the table but didn't look at it. He was the kind of person who prepared materials and then didn't use them because the materials were for later, for record, not for the conversation itself. The number was a prepaid, as Detective Reyes told you. We can't identify the caller directly from the number. However, the content of the call, he paused, the content tells us something. That there's a second party, Mason said. At minimum, possibly a coordinating structure. The man in our custody right now, his name is Devlin Cross. And that's public enough that I can tell you it has ties to a network that's been running an extortion and robbery circuit through 4 counties for approximately 18 months. Last night was not a random attack. Officer Donovan ran Cross's plate 2 weeks ago during a routine stop, what she was looking at. But Cross's people noticed her name and her patrol area, and last night was disses. Deliberate, Mason said. Deliberate. Gall nodded. And whoever called you last night knew within 40 minutes that you were involved, which means they were monitoring police communications in some capacity, or they had a contact at the scene. The room was quiet. Mason processed that, looked at Reyes. Istintudint. Her expression had the careful neutrality of someone who'd already sat with this information for a few hours and had worked through the first wave of reactions. You're telling me my name is in their system, Mason said. We're telling you. The call was not casual, Gall said. And given that, we want to discuss what additional support looks like for your family in the short term while we to know the scope of this network, Mason said. Gall blinked. That's not information I can share with. I need to know how many people are potentially active, whether Cross is communicating with anyone from custody, and whether the call I received was designed to intimidate me out of cooperation or to warn me about something specific. The room was quiet again. Gall looked at him with an expression that had moved incrementally from controlled professional courtesy to something more calibrated. The look of a man revising his model of who he was talking to. Mr. Rourke, he said, what exactly did you do in the Navy? Mason looked at him. What's relevant right now is my son, he said, and whether the threat to him is active or rhetorical. Both are relevant, Gall said, because if I'm going to be honest with you, he leaned forward slightly. And I'm inclined to be, given that your intervention last night may have broken the surface of something we've been trying to locate for months. The answer to your question is that we don't know yet. We don't know if the call was a scare tactic from someone operating above Cross who wanted to limit civilian cooperation, or if there is a specific and actionable threat to your family. Mason sat with that. The honest answer was the worst possible answer, and also the only useful one. What do you need from me? He said. Your complete account of last night. Every observation, every sensory detail, every inference. Your consent to use Rex for a follow-on search of a secondary location that came up overnight in our investigation, a storage facility on Route 9 east of town, which Cross's name appears near in a transaction record from 3 months ago. A search warrant in process. Judge is reviewing it now. We expect it within 2 hours. Mason looked at Reyes. Your department's K9 unit? He said. Holt pulled a training day yesterday before the call-out last night, Ray said. He's rested, but his handler is at the hospital. Her sister was in a car accident early this morning. She's not available. She paused. Rex performed last night. We have the record, Rex, unofficial civilian, not certified for evidentiary deployment. Mason looked at Gall. You know that anything Rex finds could be challenged in court, he said. Uncertified civilian animal. I know the law, Gall said. I'm asking you to assist in the preliminary search, which will inform where we direct our certified resources for the evidentiary follow-through. If Rex indicates on a location, we document it and bring in a federally certified unit for the formal search. Rex's indication is not the evidence. Rex's indication tells us where to put the evidence. It was legally careful, not airtight but careful. It was also, Mason recognized, a request from a federal officer to a civilian to voluntarily assist in a federal investigation, which was a different thing entirely from last night, which had been a man walking home. My son has school until 3, Mason said. I want to be back before he's out. The facility is 20 minutes out, Gall said. We'll have you back in 2 hours. I want daily communication about threat assessment until you're confident that call was scarce tactics and not operational. Agreed. And I want an honest answer when things change, not a managed one. Held his gaze. Agreed, he said again. Mason looked at Reyes one more time. She gave him nothing, which, in its own way, was something. She wasn't telling him to trust Gall. She was letting him make his own call. He looked at Rex under the table. Let's do the statement first, Mason said. The facility. What followed was 90 minutes of the most thorough debrief Mason had been through in years. Gall asked questions with the precision of someone who'd been trained to extract maximum information from eyewitnesses, accounts not leading, not loaded, but structured in a way that moved systematically through the timeline and circled back at specific points to cross-check consistency. Mason answered completely. He described the approach to Claire, the physical assessment, the call to dispatch. He described Rex's alert, the weight shift sound, the position he estimated the subject had been holding in the corridor. He described the fence line, Rex's contact point, the direction of the trail. He described the phone call in verbatim detail, not approximately verbatim, actually verbatim, word for word, including the specific cadence of the pause before the threat. Wrote everything by hand. Old habit, or deliberate Mason wasn't sure which. Reyes had stopped taking notes at some point and was just watching Mason with the quiet assessment she'd been running on him since the night before. Hostile, analytical, like a woman adding columns. When it was done, Gall closed the folder. Your service record came through this morning, he said. He didn't say what was in it, yet. He didn't have to. The fact that he was mentioning it communicated enough. I figured it would, Mason said. It answered some questions. I'm sure it did. Gall stood, offered the hand again. There's a vehicle out front. Take your own car. It's less visible than a federal vehicle on a country road. We'll run parallel. They drove out Route 9 with Gall's unmarked a quarter-mile behind. The storage facility was the kind of place that existed specifically because people had things they didn't want near where they lived, a long, low building divided into individual units, corrugated metal doors, a keypad at the entrance gate, security cameras that Mason cataloged as he pulled in, 2 at the gate, 1 on the northeast corner, 1 on the facility office, camera position on the south row that covered units 12 through 28. The warrant had come through while they were driving. Gall's phone had buzzed, and he'd said 2 words into it, and that was that. 17. They stood in front of it, Mason, Rex, Gall, and 2 agents Mason had met in the parking lot, who wore the specific nondescript jacket that federal agents wore in field situations, and which was identifiable as a federal agent's jacket to anyone who'd spent time around federal agents. Walk him along the door first, Gall said, before we open it. Mason brought Rex to the door. Long corrugated metal, padlocked, the rubber seal at the base, creating a narrow gap at floor level. The dog moved along it with his nose at the gap, and Mason watched the ears, the tail, the posture of the back legs. 12 feet down the door, Rex stopped. Sat, the specific hard-stop sit of a dog that had found what it was looking for. Here, Mason said. Gall looked at his agents. One of them had bolt cutters. The padlock came off. The door rolled up. Inside, stacked on metal shelving and on the floor in 2 organized rows, were cases. Hard plastic cases, the military surplus type, olive drab with latching hardware. 12 of them. Beside them, cardboard boxes with hardware store logos on the outside. Beside those, 3 large duffel bags with their zippers closed. And against the back wall, under a tarp, stacks of cash. Banded. The specific neat organization of someone who moved large amounts of money regularly and had stopped thinking of it as remarkable. One of the agents said something low that wasn't directed at anyone in particular. Gall stood very still and looked at the interior of Unit 17 for about 10 seconds. He looked at Mason. This is going to take a while to process, he said. Rex stays on the perimeter until the CERT team heads arrive. I know that too. Gall turned to his agents and started talking in the rapid, specific language of a man with a large amount of work suddenly in front of him. Mason stepped back from the unit doorway and moved Rex away from the active scene and found a position 20 feet out by the facility's south fence where they were out of the way and had good visibility of both the unit and the entrance gate. The cold had broken slightly since the night before, still below freezing, but the wind had died and the snow had stopped, and the sky was doing something tentative with light on the eastern horizon. Rex sat at Mason's feet and looked at the facility entrance with the patient purposeful, attention, who understood that the work wasn't fully done, but the most immediate part of it was. Mason's phone buzzed. He looked at it. Owen's school. The front desk. His stomach dropped through the ground. He answered before the second buzz finished. Mr. Rourke, this is Patricia at Silver Creek Elementary. I'm sorry to call everything is okay. Owen is fine. He was already walking toward the car. But there was a man outside the school fence this morning, about 30 minutes ago. One of our teachers noticed him. He was watching the yard during recess. When the teacher approached the fence, he left. But Owen told us the man waved at him, like he knew him. The car keys were in his hand. I'm coming, Mason said. Mr. Rourke, we have the situation handled. There's no need. I'm coming right now, he said, and the way he said it ended the conversation. He turned toward Gall, who had heard enough of the exchange to be reading Mason's posture with an expression that had sharpened into focus. My son's school, Mason said. Gall was already reaching for his own phone. He said, I'll have a unit there before you are. Mason got in the car. Rex jumped into the back, and the door barely closed before Mason had it in reverse and was moving toward the facility gate. And the car's old engine did something it hadn't done. In months, it responded cleanly. All cylinders, like it understood that this was not the time to be a 12-year-old Subaru. The facility gate opened on its sensor as he approached. He hit Route 9 doing 50 and climbing. The school was 18 minutes out at legal speed. Mason covered it in 11. He pulled into the school parking lot with the tires cutting through packed snow and the Subaru's back end sliding 2 feet before it caught, and he was out of the car before the engine finished dying. Rex vaulting out behind him, and a Silver Creek PD unit was already there. Briggs. Of course it was Briggs. The kid had apparently been assigned to Mason's orbit by some organizational gravity, parked at the curb with his door open and his radio in his hand. He's inside, Briggs said. Owen's fine. He's in the office. Mason didn't slow down. The front entrance had a security buzzer and a camera, and the office administrator must have been watching the feed because the door unlocked before Mason reached it. He went through the hallway crayon artwork on both walls, the smell of institutional cleaner and cafeteria food, and pushed through the office door. Owen was sitting in a chair beside the desk, still in his winter coat, backpack on his lap, holding it the way kids held things when they were trying to appear calm about something that had unsettled them. He looked up when Mason came in. Dad. One word. The specific relief in it was something Mason felt in his chest in a way he didn't have language for and didn't need language for. He crossed the office in 4 steps and crouched in front of his son's chair. Okay? Owen nodded. His jaw was set in the way it got when he was working to keep his face together. The man at the fence, Mason said. Did he say anything to you? Shook his head. He just waved, like he knew me. But I didn't know him. What did he look like? He was far away, across the yard. Owen thought about it with the effortful precision of a kid trying to do something he took seriously. He had a dark coat, and he was tall, I think. He had his hood up. Did he have anything in his hands? I don't think so. The woman behind the desk, Patricia, the administrator who'd called, was watching Mason with the careful expression of someone trying to gauge how alarmed to be, based on how alarmed the parent appeared. Mason stood. I need to pull Owen from school for the rest of the day, he said. Of course. She stopped. Is there something we should know for our security protocol? There's a police officer outside right now. His name is Briggs. He can speak to your principal about what information is appropriate to share. Mason looked at Owen. Get your stuff. We're going. Owen was already standing. They came out of the office into the hallway, and Briggs was standing at the front entrance, and the two of them went through a brief, low-voiced exchange while Owen stood beside Mason, and Rex pressed against Owen's leg with the affectionate deliberateness of a dog that knew something was wrong and had decided physical proximity was the correct response. No, put his hand on Rex's back without looking down. The man who was at the fence, Briggs said, keeping his voice below Owen's hearing. Teacher says he was there for maybe 4 minutes. Vehicle visible from the fence line. He walked away east when she started toward him. On foot. Looks like. Gall's people need that information. I already called it in. Mason looked at him. Briggs was standing differently than he had the night before, not more confident exactly, but more settled. Like the overnight had adjusted something. Where are you taking him? Briggs asked. Mason thought about it for exactly 2 seconds. Somewhere that isn't my apartment, he said. He put Owen in the car. Rex took the back seat. He drove south on Meridian without a specific destination for the first 4 blocks, made a decision, and turned toward the part of town where the commercial strip met the residential edge, and there was a diner called Patsy's that had been there since what the sign claimed was 1971, and which Mason knew from 6 months of. Late shift breakfast was open continuously. Well lit, had 2 entrance points, and was never entirely empty. He found a booth with a wall at his back and a clear line to both doors. Owen looked at the menu with the focused attention of a kid who had decided that normal activities were the correct response to abnormal circumstances, which was something Mason hadn't taught him exactly, but which had apparently developed on its own. Can I get the pancakes? Yeah, and the hot chocolate? Bud? The waitress came. Owen ordered with the careful politeness he always used with strangers, please, and thank you in the right places, making eye contact, folding his menu when he was done. Mason ordered coffee and whatever the breakfast special was without looking at the menu. When she left, Owen looked at him across the table. Is this about what happened last night? He said. Mason looked at his son. Why do you think something happened last night? Because you smelled like outside when you got home, and it was almost 6 in the morning, and your hands were wrapped up, and there's a police car that's been driving past our school. Owen said it plainly, not accusatory, just presenting the evidence. That he'd intervened. So also you only get the breakfast special without looking at the menu when you're thinking about something else. Mason sat with that. Yeah, he said. It's about last night. Are you in trouble? Is someone else in trouble? Someone might try to cause trouble because I helped a police officer last night. We're going to be somewhere different for a few hours while some people sort it out. Owen considered this. Rex had his chin on the booth seat beside Owen, which Rex was not supposed to do, which Mason did not address. The police officer you helped, Owen said. Is she okay? She's going to be okay. She's in the hospital right now, but she's going to be okay. The man at the fence. We don't know who that was yet, but it's connected. Probably. Owen nodded. He had the face of someone processing information and arriving at conclusions and deciding which ones to say out loud. He said, just okay. No follow-up, no escalation, no performance. He picked up the little half and half creamers from the table caddy and started stacking them into a small pyramid with the same concentrated patience with which he approached everything. And Mason watched him do it and felt something in the back of his throat that he didn't examine too closely. His phone buzzed. Gall, he answered. We've confirmed the man at the fence is not Devlin Cross, Gall said. Cross is in federal custody. Since 2 hours ago, we moved him after the storage unit find this morning. The man at the school is a second party. We're working on ID from the school's exterior camera. The camera quality at that school is going to be a problem. We're enhancing. It takes time. A pause. Mason, the contents of Unit 17 are significant. We're still cataloging, but preliminary assessment suggests this operation is larger than our current case file indicated. Cross is lower tier than we thought. There are people above him, and one of those people made a phone call at 1 in the morning. That's the working theory, which means our timeline for threat resolution is longer than I'd prefer to tell you. Mason looked at Owen, who had successfully completed his pyramid and was now looking at it with satisfaction. How much longer, Mason said. Days, possibly a week. We're moving fast, but the network is more distributed than... I have a 9-year-old, I know. We're discussing protective placement for. Define that. Temporary relocation. Voluntary. A secure location outside Silver Creek while the threat picture clarifies. A witness protection situation, nothing that formal. Just a placement. Owen's pyramid collapsed. He looked at it for a moment, then started rebuilding it. What's the location? Mason said. We have a contact facility in Missoula. 45 minutes. Comfortable. You'd both be there. A pause. I won't pretend it's mandatory. It's a strong recommendation based on what we found this morning. Waitress delivered the hot chocolate and the coffee. Owen wrapped both hands around his mug and inhaled the steam with the pure, uncomplicated pleasure of a child encountering something warm on a cold day. I'll call you back in 20 minutes, Mason said. He put the phone on the table. Owen looked at it, then at him. We're going somewhere? Owen said. Maybe for a few days. Like a trip? Come? Yes. Owen thought about it. Can I bring my Legos? As many as fit in your backpack. Owen seemed to find this satisfactory. He went back to his hot chocolate. Mason drank his coffee and looked at the diner entrance and ran the calculation again from the top. The calculation had the same output it had the first time and the second time. He couldn't see the full shape of this from where he was standing. He knew some of the pieces and not others. He knew the threat to Owen was real enough that a federal agent was recommending relocation. He knew the operation they'd stumbled into the edge of was larger than last night had suggested. So he knew that Devlin Cross had been watching Claire Donovan for 2 weeks before attacking her, which meant this network was patient and organized. He also knew that sitting still and waiting for resolution was its own category of risk. You didn't get neutrality by doing nothing. You got exposed. He picked up the phone and called Gall back before the 20 minutes were up. "We'll do the placement," he said. "But I need 2 things. What are they?" "I want to know what's in those cases from Unit 17, the full inventory, the category. I want to know what we're dealing with." A pause. Gall was deciding something. "Weapons," Gall said. "Modified. Not legal in this country. The full assessment is ongoing." He said it carefully, with the specific care of someone who'd made a decision to give more than the minimum because the minimum wasn't serving the situation. "What's the second thing?" "When you have the ID on the man at the school, I want to see it for you tell me what you think about it." "Why? Because I might recognize him." The silence on the line had a specific quality. The quality of someone who had just received new information and was updating. "From where?" Gall said. "I don't know yet. That's why I need to see the photo first." He could hear Gall breathing on the line. "I'll send it when we have it," Gall said. They drove back to the apartment, and Mason packed with the efficiency of someone who'd spent years moving between locations with minimal notice. Owen packed with the enthusiasm of someone who'd never done this before and found it interest, which meant Mason had to redirect twice, once when Owen tried to pack 6 books in addition to the Legos. Yes, he'd intervened. And once when Owen attempted to bring the full contents of his art supply box, which had never survived transport without losing at least 4 colored pencils under the seat. 2 books, Mason said. 3, 2 and the small sketchbook. Owen considered this as a negotiation. Deal. They were in the car in 38 minutes. Rex in the back with Owen, who had claimed the right to sit next to the dog with the assumption that this was obviously how it worked, and Mason in the front, working his way out of Silver Creek on the route Gall had sent to his phone. The contact facility in Missoula turned out to be a house. Real house, on a residential street, 2-car garage, the kind of neighborhood where dogs ran in yards, and the mailboxes had decorative numbers. It was owned, Gall had said on the drive, by a retired federal contractor who rented it for exactly these situations, not high profile, institutional. Just a place where a person and a child could exist without being visible. A woman met them at the door. 50s, substantial build, the kind of easy physical authority that came from people who were used to managing difficult situations without drawing attention to the management. Her name was Donna. She shook Mason's hand and then crouched down to Owen's level. "I heard there might be Legos," she said. Owen looked at her with measured assessment. "I brought the space set. There's a table in the back room," Donna said. "I'll show you." She took Owen and Rex through the house, and Mason stood in the front hall and let himself be still for 30 seconds. Just 30. The drive, the packing, the constant assessment of exit points and sight lines, and the specific weight of moving through a situation with a child in it. He allowed himself 30 seconds to put that down. Then Gall arrived. He came through the side door with one of his agents and a laptop bag, and the look of a man who had been awake for approximately 22 hours and was running on institutional momentum rather than anything biological. He set the laptop on the kitchen table and sat without ceremony. "The photo came through," he said. He turned the laptop to face Mason. The image was from the school's exterior camera, grainy, enhanced, the resolution fighting against its own limitations. Tall, dark coat, hood partially up. The face was turned toward the schoolyard at a 3/4 angle. The enhancement had sharpened the facial structure without making it clean. Mason looked at it. He didn't say anything for 7 seconds. "You recognize him," Gall said. "Not a question. I don't know yet." Mason looked at the jaw the way the man stood. The specific way the shoulders sat, not casual, not military, something between. Can you pull his left side? That's the best angle we have. Ear, can you crop to the ear? Gall looked at him. The ear, he said. The upper helix, the way it folds. It's a small thing, but Gall turned the laptop and worked with his agent for about 90 seconds. The crop came up. The ear in question was small. The upper helix folded in a specific way, almost flat, a trait that was genetic and distinct, and that Mason had cataloged years ago in a context that was now surfacing from a place in his memory that he hadn't opened in a long time. It wasn't certain. The image was too poor for certain, but it was enough. There was a man, Mason said, in a situation I was involved in, overseas roughly 9 years ago. He chose his words with the precision of someone navigating around a series of things he couldn't say in a kitchen in Missoula to a federal agent whose clearance level he didn't know. He was operating in a capacity he was working multiple sides of a situation. He was identified, eventually, but not apprehended. He went off the grid before the net closed. Gall was very still. You're telling me the man at your son's school has a connection to your service. I'm telling you that if this is the man I'm thinking of, your county robbery network isn't a county robbery network. It's a revenue stream for something organized enough to have people with that kind of background in it. Mason looked at the laptop screen again. And that network has had 9 years to build, since the last time anyone tried to close it. The kitchen was quiet. Gall looked at his agent. The agent looked at Gall. Something passed between them that was not spoken. What's the name? Gall said. Of the man you're thinking of. I don't have a reliable name. He operated under 3 that I'm aware of, and none of them were real. But I can give you a physical profile, a behavioral profile, and a set of known operational associations that your people can run against existing records. Mason paused. It'll take time. But if the match comes back, your case just got federally significant in a category you weren't expecting. It was already federally significant, Gall said. More so, Mason said. Gall closed the laptop, opened it again, closed it again. The particular restlessness of a man whose case had just expanded beyond the briefing he'd walked in with. I need to make some calls, he said. I know. Gall stopped. If what you're describing is accurate, the threat to you and your son is not about intimidating a civilian witness. It's about containing someone who can identify a network actor. I know that too, which means the placement here is appropriate. Yes, I made the right call taking him here. Gall looked at him across the kitchen table. The look had evolved over the course of the morning from professional courtesy to recalibration, to something that was now in the territory of genuine reassessment. Warmth, this wasn't warmth. The situation didn't call for it, but the specific regard of someone encountering a resource they hadn't accounted for. Your service record, Gall said. The version that came through on the routine federal pull, it has gaps. I'm aware. The gaps are the parts I'd need to understand, to know how much weight to put on what you just told me. I know that too. Are you going to help me with the gaps? Mason looked at him. Tell me what your clearance level is, he said. Gall told him. Mason thought about it. There's a contact at the Joint Special Operations Command Administrative Office in Virginia. His name is Colonel David Ferris. He's retired now, running a consulting practice in Arlington. He knew me. He knew my record. Mason said it evenly, without ceremony. If you call him, he'll tell you what he's authorized to tell you. What he's authorized to tell you will be enough. And what won't he be authorized to tell me? The parts that don't matter anymore. Gall wrote the name down, by hand with a pen, in a small notebook with a cardboard cover that looked like he'd been using it for months. Then he looked up. How long ago did you leave the teams, he said. Question this time, not procedural. 6 years. Why? Mason looked toward the hallway. From somewhere in the back of the house came the sound of Owen's voice explaining something to Donna, the specific tone of a kid who had found an adult willing to listen and was taking full advantage of it. Something about the space station module configuration and why it mattered. Wife died, Mason said. Brain aneurysm. March 6 years ago. Owen was 3. He said it the way he'd learned to say it straightforward. No performance, because performance made other people's discomfort his problem to manage. And he had enough to manage. I was in country when it happened. I got word by satellite call. I had to finish the op before I could come home. The kitchen was quiet. I'm sorry, Gall said. And he said it, the way people said it, when they meant it, rather than when they said it, because it was the correct response. I left after that. Took Owen, moved to Silver Creek because it was small, and it was affordable, and it was as far from everything I'd been doing as I could get, while still being able to afford rent and a dog. He looked at the table. It wasn't a strategy, it was just what I did. Gall nodded. Then his phone rang. He looked at it and stood up immediately, which told Mason it was someone above him in whatever chain he reported to. He stepped out of the kitchen, and his voice went low. Mason got up and went to find Owen. The back room had a long folding table, which Donna had apparently cleared for exactly this purpose, and Owen was midway through the space station's central hub, watching with genuine, rather than performed interest, as Owen talked her through the structural rationale for the docking configuration. Rex was asleep against the baseboard heater. "How's it going?" Mason said. Looked up. Donna says she used to work in aerospace. Mason looked at Donna. "Structural analysis," she said. "Defense contractor, mostly. Long time ago. She says the real station's docking ports work differently than the Lego version," Owen said. "Not as different as you'd think." Huh. Owen looked at him with the assessment eyes. "You talked to the FBI man," Owen said. "I did. Is it better or worse than this morning?" Mason considered lying. He considered the partial truth, the managed version. He looked at his son, who had sat in an unfamiliar house in a strange town and built a Lego space station, and asked a fair question. "More complicated than this morning," he said. "But being more complicated doesn't mean worse. It means we know more about what we're dealing with, which is better. Usually, yeah." Owen turned back to the Lego set. "Okay," he said. "I'm going to finish the docking module." "Good plan." Mason went back to the kitchen. Gall was still on the phone. Mason poured himself another cup of coffee from the pot Donna had left on the counter and stood by the window that looked out at the small backyard, a patch of winter-brown grass, bird feeder with frozen suet, a fence with a gate that opened to the alley. He catalogued the fence height, the gate latch, the visibility line from the back neighbor's second floor. He couldn't help it. Gall came back in and looked at the way Mason was standing at the window and seemed to understand immediately what Mason was doing. "This street's been used before," Gall said. "We've never had a problem with the location. First time for everything," Mason said. Not accusatory, just the view from where he stood. "My supervisor wants to talk to you directly," Gall said. "Video call, within the hour. She runs the organized crime division for this region. Your name, or rather, the inference from your gaps in record got her attention. She knows Ferris? She will by the time we connect." Mason turned from the window. "What does she want from me?" he said. Gall looked at him steadily. "Honestly, I think she wants to know if you're available." The word sat in the kitchen between them. Available. A word that meant one thing in a normal conversation and a specific other thing in a federal context. Coming from a division chief after a morning in which a storage unit full of illegally modified weapons had been found, and a schoolyard surveillance had been connected to a 9-year-old overseas intelligence file. Mason looked at the hallway, at the rectangle of light where the back room was, where he could hear Owen explaining something about load-bearing structures to a retired defense contractor. "For what, exactly?" Mason said. "Consultation," Gall said. "To start." Mason looked at him. "To start," he repeated. Held his gaze, without filling the silence, which was, Mason thought, the most honest answer the man had given him all day. From the back room, Owen's voice. "The key thing is the center of mass. If you get the center of mass wrong, the whole thing is unstable." Mason stood in the kitchen with his cold coffee and looked at Warren Gall and thought about center of mass and about the 6 years he'd spent trying to establish one, about how a snowy street at midnight had moved every variable on the board in less than 12 hours. "Set up the call," he said. Gall nodded. He picked up his phone. Outside, the Montana sky was doing something with the light that it did on clear winter afternoons, going pale gold and sharp at the edges, the kind of light that made distances look closer than they were, and made everything in the middle ground stand out in high definition. Mason went back to the window. He looked at the fence, the gate, the alley. He memorized the neighbor's roofline, and he waited for the call. The video call connected at 2:47 in the afternoon. The screen showed a woman in her mid-50s sitting in what was clearly a federal office, not a home setup, not a conference room, designed to look impressive, just a functional space with a window behind her, showing gray Virginia sky and a bookshelf with more binders than books. Her name was Assistant Director Carol Mehta, and she had the face of someone who had spent 30 years in institutional settings without letting the institution fully absorb her. Sharp, economical, the kind of attention that didn't drift. She looked at seen through the screen for a moment before saying anything. Colonel Ferris sends his regards, she said. How is he? Retired and annoyed about it. A beat. He spoke highly of you, with some specificity. That's generous of him. It wasn't generosity. He's not a generous man. She folded her hands on the desk in front of her. Mr. Rourke, I've been reviewing what Agent Gall sent me from this morning's operation. The storage unit, the profile you provided on the individual from the school camera, the connection you drew to the overseas case from 9 years ago. She paused. I want to be direct with you. Please. The man you identified, we ran your physical and behavioral profile against existing federal databases in the past 3 hours. We have a tentative match to a person of interest in an ongoing international financial crime investigation. Confirmed, but close enough that my counterpart at the Financial Crimes Unit is now on this call in an adjacent office, waiting for me to finish talking to you. She looked at him steadily. You pulled a thread last night that may have a very long tail. Mason said nothing. The question I have for you, Mehta continued, is whether the thread pulling was accidental. A police officer was bleeding in the snow, Mason said. I stopped. That part was completely accidental. And afterward, I told people what I observed. That's what you do. You also identified a surveillance position, directed a K-9 search, participated in a federally significant evidence location, and drew a connection between a rural Montana criminal network and a 9-year-old international intelligence file. She said it without inflection. Accusatory. Just presenting the count. That's a significant output for a warehouse worker walking home. I was a different person before I was a warehouse worker. Yes, she picked up a page from the desk. He could see it was a printed document, text-heavy, and he recognized the format of a service record even at screen resolution. You were. And that person is in this file, or at least the parts of it that Ferris was authorized to release. She set it down. What I want to know is what happened to that person. The kitchen in Missoula was very quiet. Gall was to Mason's left, off camera, not moving. He moved to Silver Creek, Mason said. He got a warehouse job. He raised his son. And last night? Mason looked at her through the screen. Last night he did what was in front of him to do, he said. Mehta was quiet for a moment. I'm going to be honest with you about what I want, she said. And then I'm going to be honest about what I can offer. And then you're going to tell me what you think. Does that work? Yes, what I want is consultation. Specifically, your knowledge of the individual from the overseas case and any operational intelligence you retained from that period that may be relevant to our current investigation. We're not asking you to return to active anything. We're asking you to sit in rooms and answer questions and look at photographs and tell us what you know. She paused. That's the scope of what I'm asking. It is not a stepping stone to something else, unless you choose it to be. How long? The intensive phase, the debriefing. The identification sessions, 2 weeks, maybe 3. After that, it's as needed. Could be a phone call once a month. Could be nothing for 6 months and then something. I have a son, I know. The placement in Missoula is available as long as you need it. If you cooperate with us, we cooperate with your security situation. That's a direct commitment, not a general statement. Ye say, and the threat assessment? The man at the school? Within 72 hours of your formal cooperation, we'll have the surveillance and intelligence resources on Yamfam's situation that a local department simply can't provide. She said it plainly. I'm not going to pretend that's not a factor in why I'm making this offer now. Is a factor, but it's not the whole offer. The whole offer is that what you know is useful, and you should know that it's useful, and you should be able to decide what to do with that information with all the facts in front of you. Mason sat with it. It was a cleaner pitch than he'd expected. Pressure dressed as patriotism. No appeal to duty. No suggestion that he owed anything. Just here is what I want. Here is what I have. Here is the honest accounting. He had been given worse offers by people who thought they were being generous. What's the second honest thing? He said. You said two honest things. Almost smiled. The second is that if you decline, the Missoula placement ends in 48 hours because we can't justify the resource allocation without your cooperation. We'll assist the local department in securing your apartment and we'll escalate the threat assessment, but the full federal umbrella comes with the consultation agreement. She let it sit for a second. I'm telling you that because you asked for honesty and because I think you'd figure it out anyway. You're right that I'd figure it out. I know. He looked at the window over Meta's shoulder. Gray Virginia sky. A long way from Montana. I need to talk to my son, he said. Blinked. It was a small thing, barely visible. How old is he? 9. You're going to discuss this with a 9-year-old. I'm going to tell my son something is changing, and I'm going to give him enough truth to make it not frightening, Mason said. That's different from a policy discussion. But yes, I talked to him. He deserves that. Meta was quiet. Give me an hour, Mason said. You have it. The screen went dark. Gall let out a breath that he'd apparently been holding for a while. Went better than I expected, he said. What were you expecting? More resistance from her. She doesn't usually offer terms like that on a first contact. Ferris vouched for me. Ferris told her things that aren't in the public record, Gall said. That's different from a voucher. A voucher gets you a handshake. Whatever Ferris said got you Meta, offering a clean deal inside the first 5 minutes. Mason stood up, stretched his back. The kitchen chair had been designed by someone who'd never sat in it for 4 hours. Where are the terms of the consultation agreement? Pulled a document from his bag. Printed, 12 pages, the specific font of federal legal paperwork. He put it on the table. I'll read it when I talk to my son, Mason said. He picked it up and went to the back room. Owen had finished the space station. It sat on the table in its completed form, 3 interconnected modules, the solar array panels extending on both sides, the docking port at the correct angle. Donna was gone, presumably to give them space, which Mason appreciated without having asked for it. Rex was awake now, sitting beside Owen's chair, watching Mason come in with the patient assessment of a dog that understood something had been decided. Owen looked at the document in Mason's hand. What's that? Something I need to read. Mason sat in the chair beside his son. And something I need to talk to you about. Owen looked at him. The 9-year-old face that could, in certain lights, at certain angles, look remarkably like his mother's face, the set of the eyes. Yo! The way the jaw held when it was thinking, K. Owen said. Mason put the document on the table. He looked at his son. You know I used to do a job that was different from the warehouse, he said. You were in the Navy. Specifically, I did a kind of work that involved going places and figuring things out, and sometimes helping with situations that were complicated and hard to fix. He chose the words the way you chose words for a 9-year-old, not talking down, not performing simplicity, just finding the accurate version that didn't require background knowledge the kid didn't have. People I used to work for, or people connected to them, are asking me to help with something like that again. The dangerous parts. The knowing things parts. Owen was listening with complete attention. It would mean I'd be in some meetings, and maybe some travel, but not a lot. And it would mean that while it was happening, we'd stay somewhere like this instead of our apartment. He paused. For a few weeks, maybe. Because of the man at the fence, Owen said. Partly. Also because if I help these people, they help us. They make sure we're safe while they were working on the problem. Looked at the space station, then at Rex, then at his father. Is it important, he said, what they're asking you to help with? Bud, I think it is. Like to more people than just us? Probably a lot more people than us. Owen thought about it. He picked up one of the remaining Lego pieces, a small connector block that hadn't made it into the final build, and turned it over in his fingers. If you don't do it, what happens? He said. Mason looked at him. We go home in 2 days and the local police do the best they can with what they have, he said. Which is a lot less than the people who are asking me. The man at the fence might not get caught. Might not. Quickly, Owen set the connector block on the table, aligned it with the edge, which was a habit. The kid couldn't set something down without squaring it to the nearest surface. You should do it, he said. You'd be okay staying somewhere different for a while? I have my Legos. He looked up. And Rex. Yeah. Mason sat with that for a second. Yeah, he said. Owen looked at the space station. Can I come to Missoula next time? He said. Like actually see the city, not just a house. Deal. Picked up another Lego piece and began adding a detail to the docking module that clearly hadn't been in the instructions. A modification, his own design. Mason went back to the kitchen and called Meta. I'm in, he said. Good. A pause. Gall will walk you through the agreement. There's one item on page 9 that's negotiable, the exclusivity clause. Given your specific situation, we can adjust the language. I saw it. I'll flag it when we go through. Ferris also asked me to tell you something. Meta said it in the slightly different register of someone delivering someone else's message. He said, and I'm quoting, "Tell him the warehouse was never the whole story." Mason stood in the kitchen with the Montana winter going flat and pale outside the window. Tell him he's not wrong, Mason said. The agreement took 2 hours to go through. Gall was patient, professional, flagged 3 places where Mason asked questions that required calls to the Helena office for clarification. The exclusivity clause was adjusted. The compensation structure was outlined consultant rate. Yeah, federal scale, not nothing. The security commitment for Owen and the apartment on Birchwood was codified in a language that Mason read 3 times before accepting. He signed at 6:14 p.m. The next 3 weeks were not smooth. He hadn't expected smooth. The intensive debrief sessions happened in Helena, in a federal building, in a room with a one-way window that Mason noted and no one acknowledged. He sat across from a succession of analysts and investigators and described, in controlled and specific detail, the overseas case from 9 years ago, the timeline, the personnel, the operational structure, specific physical and behavioral characteristics of the man he now believed was connected to the Silver Creek network. He answered questions he'd expected and questions he hadn't. He looked at photographs, hundreds of them, organized into sessions by the analysts with the specific methodology of people building an identification case that needed to hold in court. On day 11 of the debrief, he identified the man. With certainty, no single photograph provided certainty. But on day 11, the analyst put in front of him a series of images taken from a European traffic camera system over a period of 3 months, and in 4 of those images, the same man appeared. Different hair, different clothing, same ear, same shoulder geometry, same specific way, the left foot turned slightly outward when standing at rest, a skeletal characteristic rather than a postural habit, something that didn't change with a new coat or a different city. The lead analyst looked at Mason's face when he stopped on the 4th image. That's him, Mason said. She made a note. 14 days after that, Meta called him directly. We have him, she said. Not in custody yet. He crossed into Canada 2 days ago. We're working with RCMP on the extradition framework. We have him identified. We have a warrant. And we have enough in the evidentiary chain to put him in front of a federal judge. A pause. Your identification was a critical link in that chain. Mason was sitting on the small back porch of the Missoula house. It was late February now. Cold, but not the ferocious cold of the first week. The temperature doing the thing Montana temperatures did in late winter, backing off slightly, testing, not committing to warmth, but no longer actively hostile. What about Cross, he said. Devlin Cross pled out last week. Federal charges, state charges, the full package. He's looking at 12 to 15 years minimum. In exchange for cooperation with the federal case, which cooperation has been. Meta paused with what might have been the ghost of humor. Limited. But enough. The network? Still being mapped. The storage unit contents alone are going to generate cases for the next 2 years. But the structural leadership, the level above Cross, is compromised. People are going quiet, going ground, going other countries. The active threat to you is resolved. He looked at the bird feeder in the backyard. Someone had refilled the suet cake. He wasn't sure if it was Donna or Owen. He suspected Owen. Go home, Mason, Meta said. Take your son home. He went to find Owen. The kid was at the long table with the space station, which had accumulated modifications over the past weeks, until it no longer bore much relationship to the box art. Owen had integrated pieces from 2 other sets, a city set, and a deep-sea exploration set that Donna had produced from somewhere on the 2nd week, and the result was a structure that followed its own internal logic rather than any official design. We're going home, Mason said. Owen looked up. He didn't say anything for a moment. When? Tomorrow morning. Owen looked at the space station, then at Rex, who was in his standard position at the baseboard heater. Can I bring the station? We'll wrap it in a blanket. It might fall apart in the car. Then we rebuild it when we get home. Owen considered this. Okay. He began carefully detaching the solar array panels, the most structurally vulnerable parts, and setting them aside. Systematic, taking apart what he'd built with the same focus he'd used building it. Mason stood in the doorway and watched. They drove back to Silver Creek on a morning that was doing something tentative, with sunlight not warm, not promising warmth, but allowing the possibility. The Subaru made the kind of noises it made when it was functioning normally, which was to say several noises it probably shouldn't make but had always made, and which Mason had learned to distinguish from the noises that required attention. Of the current noises required attention. Rex was in the back. Owen was in the front passenger seat, which he'd been angling for since he was 6, and which Mason had finally subtused denying him on the grounds that he was 9 now, and 9 was close enough. This hit the Silver Creek City limit at 11 in the morning. Owen looked out the window at the familiar streets. It's the same, he said. It's been 3 weeks, not 3 years. A pause. Does it feel weird to you? Coming back? Yes, he'd intervened. Mason looked at the town through the main commercial strip, the water tower with Silver Creek in black letters, the turn toward Birchwood Avenue. He's little, he said. Good weird or bad weird? He thought about it. Just weird, he said. Like when you come back from somewhere and the place you came back to is the same, but you're not entirely the same. And chewed on that. I feel that way after school sometimes, he said. Like when something big happened, and then you come home, and the house doesn't know. Mason looked at his son. Yeah, he said. Exactly like that. The apartment had the specific smell of a closed-up space not unpleasant, just sealed, the air inside unchanged for 3 weeks. Mason opened a window in the kitchen, and the winter air moved through and the smell dispersed. Owen went immediately to his room. Not because he was upset or overwhelmed. He went immediately to his room, because his room was his room, and 3 weeks was a long time, and he wanted to be in it. Mason heard him taking stock, moving things, confirming that everything was where he'd left it. The specific sound of a person reestablishing their coordinates. Rex walked through the apartment in a systematic pattern and then selected his spot near the living room radiator and lay down with the quiet finality of an animal that had also decided it was home. Mason sat at the kitchen table. The table had 3 coffee rings on it from before they left, and the morning light came through at an angle that made the rings visible in a way they usually weren't. He looked at them. Evidence of ordinary days. The kind of ordinary that he'd spent 6 years assembling piece by piece, the job, the apartment, the school route, the coffee rings, and which had seemed, at its best moments, like a structure worth maintaining, and at its worst moments, like a set of things to keep doing, until he figured out what they were for. He thought about what Ferris had said through Meta. The warehouse was never the whole story. He hadn't said it was. Never said it to himself, or anyone else as a completion. It had been a stage, a place to be, the thing you did when the thing before it ended, and you didn't yet know what came next. 6 years of that. He wasn't sure the next chapter had a clear shape yet. The consultation agreement was signed, with its as-needed language and its monthly call possibilities. Was a federal contact in his phone now? No. There was an ongoing case that would send him to Helena periodically for the next year. There were things he knew that turned out to still matter, which had surprised him more than he'd expected it to. Was Birchwood Avenue. Owen's school, Rex. The coffee rings. He wasn't choosing between those things and the other things anymore. He'd been wrong to think, 6 years ago, that it had to be a choice. He'd buried one identity to protect another, and what last month had taught him, slowly, and not without cost, was that you couldn't bury the things you were made of. You could redirect them. You could choose what they served. But they didn't stop existing because you'd stopped acknowledging them. No. His phone buzzed. He looked at it. Detective Reyes. He answered. You're back in town, she said. How'd you know? Briggs saw your car on Meridian 20 minutes ago. A pause. How's Owen? Good. Back in his room doing an inventory. Another pause shorter. Claire Donovan is being discharged today. She's been asking about you. Mason was quiet for a moment. Is she okay? She's okay, different kind of okay than before, but okay. She wants to talk to you. A beat. She doesn't want to make it a big thing. She said, and I'm quoting her, Tell him I just want to say it in person. He knew what that meant. He'd been in enough situations to know what someone meant when they wanted to say something in person that they could have said over the phone. Tell her I'll come by tomorrow morning, he said. If she's up for it, I'll tell her. He put the phone down. From Owen's room, the specific creak of the desk chair. Then Owen's voice reading something aloud to himself, a thing he did sometimes when he was settling back in, pulling himself back into the room's regular sounds. The bird feeder, outside the kitchen window, was empty. Mason made a mental note to get seed on the way to the hospital tomorrow. He got up and started making lunch. He made sandwiches cut in triangles, because that was the agreement, and he called Owen out, and they ate at the table with Rex lying across both their feet under the table, which was also not allowed, and which Mason also did not add. And outside the kitchen window, the Silver Creek winter afternoon came in with its flat pale light and its familiar cold, and it was ordinary in the way that only things earned over time get to be ordinary. The next morning, Mason drove to Silver Creek Regional Medical Center alone. Decided he'd considered taking Owen and decided against it, not because he wanted to teasen, but because what he was going to was something that needed to breathe without an audience. Claire Donovan was in a room on the 3rd floor. The discharge paperwork was apparently still being processed, which was how hospitals worked, which was to say slowly and on their own schedule. She was in civilian clothes, sitting in the chair beside the bed rather than in the bed, a backpack on the floor beside her with the zipper half open and a paperback sticking out of it. She looked up when Mason came in. She looked different from the last time he'd seen her, which was a stretcher in the dark. Yes, he didn't. Better in the obvious ways and different in the ways that were harder to name, the ways a person looked when they'd been through something and it had settled into them and they'd worked out where to put it. Yet she stood up. You don't have to stand, he said. I know. She stayed standing. I wanted to. A pause. Thank you for coming. How are you feeling? Like I got stabbed, she said. But less than I did last week. She almost smiled. Sit down. You look like you've been through something too. Different kind of something. He sat in the visitor's chair. She sat back in the chair by the bed, and for a moment, neither of them said anything, which was not uncomfortable the way silences were when two people didn't know each other. It was more like a moment of acknowledgement, recognizing that the situation that had been was large enough to need a second before words started. I wanted to say it face to face, Claire said. I know, because people send cards. Or the department does a thing. And she paused. That's fine, it's all fine, but it's not the same as actually saying it to the person. She looked at him. You stayed. When you could have called and walked away. You stayed between me and whatever was in that alley. She stopped. Started again. I've been a cop for 6 years. What it looks like when someone makes a decision to put themselves between someone else and a threat. People, and I don't say that critically, it's just true. Most people don't make that decision. That fast. Not in the dark, when they don't know what they're facing. Mason looked at her. You'd have done it, he said. I'm a police officer, so I signed up for it. You'd have done it before you signed up, he said. It's not the uniform. Claire looked at him for a moment. She said. Not maybe. She was quiet. Reyes told me some of it, she said. The federal case, the storage unit, your history. Some of it's classified. She didn't tell me the classified parts. She told me the shape of it. She looked out the window. 3rd floor, parking lot view, the Montana sky making that late winter attempt at something warmer. She also told me about the call you got. About Owen. He's okay. I know. I asked specifically. She looked back at him. You kept my name out of it. As much as you could. Reyes said, you never used the case around him as a reason for what you'd done. Mason shrugged. It had nothing to do with him. Everything you did had to do with him. She said it quietly, not as an argument, not as because you could have not stopped. You had a 9-year-old at home. You could have called 911 from down the block and kept walking. Nobody would have blamed you. I would have. She was quiet again. She said. Outside, a car pulled into the parking lot, and someone got out with a flower arrangement and hurried toward the entrance, and it was such a normal, ordinary human thing that Mason noticed it and felt something loosen slightly in his chest. There's something I wanted to ask you, Claire said. Okay. Reyes mentioned that you've taken some kind of consulting arrangement. With the federal people, yes. And you're staying in Silver Creek. We're staying in Silver Creek. She nodded. I asked because she stopped. Restarted. When I come back, which they're saying is 8 to 12 weeks, I'm going to be doing rehabilitation and some desk time. I'll be back on patrol, and Silver Creek is going to feel different than it felt before. She looked at him. Bad different necessarily. Just the street I'm going to drive past every shift now has a specific weight to it. You know what I mean? I know exactly what you mean. And I think it helps to know that the person from that street is still in this town. A pause. I don't know how to say that without it sounding like something it's not. It sounds like what it is, Mason said. It sounds like someone who went through something wanting to know the geography is stable. She exhaled. Yeah, she said. That's it.
He stood.
She stood too, automatically, then winced slightly and put one hand briefly to her left side and then dropped it, because acknowledging it was a thing she was apparently already working to stop doing. He offered his hand. She looked at it for a half second, then shook it firmly. Her grip was good, which he'd expected. Come meet Owen when you're back on your feet, he said. He's been asking how the officer from the snow is doing. He won't say it that way, but that's how he means it. She almost smiled, and then fully smiled, and it changed her face. How's Rex? She said. Perfect. Doesn't know it, though, which is probably why. She laughed. Real, short, the laugh of someone who hadn't laughed much in the past month and found that it still worked. He left. He drove back through Silver Creek, past the corner of Harlan and Fifth, where the cruiser had sat and where the snow had been dark in the streetlight. It looked like a corner now. Just a corner. A traffic sign, a building wall, a curb. The way places always looked when they'd been the site of something, and then the something had passed through and left. He drove to Owen's school and sat in the parking lot until the bell rang. Owen came out in the stream of kids, spotted the Subaru, and changed course toward it. He had his backpack on both shoulders and his coat half zipped against the cold, which was a perpetual battle. Mason had mostly stopped fighting because Owen ran warm, and the coat was apparently constricting, and the argument had never once resulted in a fully zipped coat. He got in. How was it? Mason said, fine. Owen dropped his backpack on the floor and clicked his seatbelt. Tyler Marsh finally got his Lego set, the one he's been talking about since October. The train one? The train one. Owen looked out the window. He brought pictures. Mason pulled out of the lot. You hungry, he said. Always. Patsy's or the taco place. Owen thought about it, with the gravity the question deserved. Patsy's, he said. Can Rex come? They don't allow dogs inside. He can wait by the door. He likes it. He does not like it. Hell likes it when there's a table near the window. Then he can see us. Mason looked at his son. He said. They drove to Patsy's. Rex waited by the window. Owen got pancakes and hot chocolate. Mason got the breakfast special without looking at the menu because he was thinking about other things, which was the thing Owen had identified weeks ago and which was still apparently true. Owen was building another small pyramid out of the half-and-half creamers. It fell. He rebuilt it. Mason drank his coffee and watched the street outside and thought about the phone call that would probably come from Meta in 2 weeks, and about the Helena sessions that would resume next month, and about Claire Donovan coming back to patrol duty in 12 weeks and driving past a corner that had weight now, and about Devlin Cross in a federal holding facility explaining to prosecutors the parts of the network he actually understood, which were apparently limited, which was the way these things worked when the structure was designed to keep the lower levels compartmentalized. He thought about the man with the flat upper helix, somewhere in Canada, with an RCMP file and a federal warrant, and the specific awareness, if he was the kind of person Mason believed he was, that the net had moved closer. Yet he thought about the warehouse on the south side of Town and the 6 years of loading, docks, and night shifts, and walking home at midnight, and whether he regretted any of it. Owen's pyramid fell again. Dad. Yeah. What are you thinking about? Mason looked at his son. Triangles, he said. Owen looked at the collapsed pyramid of creamers, then at his plate. I think they're better, he said. The sandwiches, I mean. Triangles are structurally superior to rectangles for handheld applications. Is that a Lego lesson or a physics lesson? Both, Owen said. Mason smiled. It wasn't a performance and it wasn't a conclusion. It was just a smile at a table in a diner in a small Montana city, with a 9-year-old who argued about sandwich geometry and a dog pressing his nose against the window glass. The ordinary things, the earned things, the things that turned out to be the point all along. You don't find out who you are in the quiet years. You find out who you stayed, even after everything tried to change you.